Hello, everyone. We're here to talk about nationalism. And this is chapter 10. This lecture is going to be the whole chapter 10. Okay, so we all know that Napoleon got people really excited about their country, and people wanted their own country. People that were living in places that had never really been a country because people were loyal to their king. Suddenly, people are feeling more loyalty to their fellow countrymen than they are their king. So I have to tell you a bit about what was going on. We're talking about the early 1800s now. So all of this land that's Germany, it wasn't a country before. It was just a whole bunch of different lands with similar ethnic groups. Well, they all joined together and made one country called Germany. Down here, you had the same thing. There was no Italy. There were just a whole bunch of different little kingdoms in here. And they all joined together and made one country called Italy. And then in the middle here, this Czechia, Austria, Croatia, Hungary, Slovakia, and part of Poland. Poland didn't exist. All of this here was a leftover area from an empire that Napoleon had destroyed called the New Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire, Napoleon crushed it. And so there were still the leaders lived here in Austria, and they were controlling this area. Well, the Hungarians rebelled against the Austrians. These are ethnic groups we're talking about, not countries. There were not countries there, but there were people that all identified as the same because they had similar cultures, and they called themselves Hungarians. And they rebelled against their leaders because they wanted their own country. And how it worked was Austria said, you're still going to be part of Austria, but you can have your own rulers. So they made one country, two rulers, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So all of this here was Austro-Hungary. And then over here you had Turkey, but Turkey was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire controlled Moldova, Romania, Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece. All of this was part of the Ottoman Empire. But then, just like the Hungarians rebelled, then the Czech people started rebelling against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they wanted their own country. Then the ethnic group of Serbians, the Serbs, started rebelling against the Ottoman Empire. They wanted their own country. The Romanian people started rebelling against the Ottoman Empire because they wanted to have their own country. And the Ottoman Empire had been really, really strong. But now they were kind of weakened. If you're fighting a whole bunch of wars all over the place, trying to control your people, you're weak. Like if, I don't know how many siblings you have, but let's pretend you have 5 siblings and it's just your mom in the house. And one of your brothers gets in trouble. Your mom can handle that, right? Well, what if all 6 of you are acting, behaving really, really badly, it's difficult for your mom to keep you all under control, right? Well, that's the same thing with a ruler of an empire. If everybody they rule is rebelling against them, they seem weak. So while they were weak, Britain and France swooped in and took control of some of the places that used to be run by the Ottoman Empire. Also, Russia swept in and took control of some of the places that the Ottoman Empire used to rule. So the Ottoman Empire was losing their control. And this fight for who controls what area, eventually one day, like 100 years in the future, led to World War I. Now, I'm going to focus on just Russia. Let's talk about Russia. Oops, sorry, gotta open my, okay. I'm going to clear this, and I'm going to write Russia up here. Now, first, I have to tell you that everything I'm about to say is so watered down. That means weak, because you can get an entire university degree. You can study what I'm about to tell you for 4 years in school, all day, every day for 4 years. And I'm about to do it all in about 20 minutes. So you're getting the really, really abbreviated version of about 100 years of Russia. But let's go. In 1815, Russia was the largest and most populous, that means had the most people, country in all of Europe. There were 2 classes. There were the nobles and the peasants, and that was it. And the ruler was Alexander II. Well, Alexander was fighting with the Ottoman Empire, trying to take land. But the British and the French didn't like Russia, and so they helped the Ottoman Empire. And so Russia lost. And when Russia lost, the people were really upset with Alexander because they had nationalist pride. They were proud of Russia. And Russia had just lost a war. And so they were embarrassed, and it made them angry with their czar. Czar is the word for the head, the emperor of Russia. You see it spelled both of these ways. Sometimes it's C-Z-A-R and sometimes it's T-S-A-R. And that's the English way to spell the emperor of Russia, is a czar. So the people were poor. We're talking about the people with a capital P. If you ever see people with a capital P, you're talking about like all the people. And the people as a whole were very, very poor and had nothing. At this time in Russia, there were still serfs, and serfs were basically slaves. They were tied to the land they were on. Well, the people started rebelling. They got really, really upset with the whole system. We're doing everything we're supposed to do, and we're still not even strong enough to win a war. And they rebelled. They got really upset about everything. Well, Alexander II tried a couple of things to make the people happy. He ended serfdom, which sounds really cool. If you end serfdom, this is like ending slavery. But all the rich people took the land and said, well, you're not working for me anymore. You can't have this land. And now the serfs have nothing. Like before, sure, they were slaves, but they at least had land that they could grow some food on. Now they're not slaves anymore, but they've got nothing. And so Alexander did some other things too to try to make the people happy, but none of it worked. It all backfired on him. It made the people more angry with him. And on March 13th, 1881, he was assassinated. That means murdered. They use this word assassinated when it's someone famous that was killed. If someone murders me, I wasn't assassinated, I was just killed. But if someone murders the president of the United States, that's an assassination. That's what that word means. It's just it's a word for the killing of a very famous person. Alexander II was assassinated on March 13th, 1881. Well, his son, Alexander III, now he's taken over, and he was so mad at the people for killing his dad. He turned everything around that his dad had done and went super, super strict on everything. He became this really, really strict ruler. And he said that in all of their lands, all lands ruled by Russia, there's going to be one language, the Russian language, that's it. If you are in a land controlled by Russia, you will speak Russian. And if you are in a land controlled by Russia, you will be Russian Orthodox. That's the religion. He allowed exactly one language and one religion. That was it. And remember, let me go back over here to the internet. He controlled, like Russia's over here, but they had all kinds of land over here. These people, they didn't speak Russian, and they're closer to Italy. Many of them were Catholics. Many of them were Jews. Many of them were Muslims. There were all kinds of different religions, but Alexander III said, if you are in a country that I control, you will speak my language. And then, because people do these kinds of things, these things called pogroms formed. A pogrom is like a gang of violent thugs that would go into like Jewish neighborhoods and destroy them. They would burn people's homes down. They would beat people up just because they were Jewish. But they did it to the Muslims and everyone else too, not just the Jews. But Alexander II was so fiercely nationalistic and saying these people, like, kind of made it seem like they were lesser people because they were a different religion or spoke a different language. So a lot of people that were different religions fled the country. They left because they weren't safe where they were. They either had to like convert to a new religion and learn a new language, or run away. A lot of people ran away. Now, we're going to jump to the 1890s. In the 1890s is when Russia finally entered the industrial age. The industrial age. So this is pretty long. Like, England has been industrialized for almost 100 years now, right? But Russia had not. Russia was still mostly peasants. There were all kinds of social and political problems that went along with this. So remember when we were talking about Western Europe and how just really, really awful the living conditions were for people that worked in these factories. Now, flash back over to Russia. These people were so poor and desperate. They had no land. They had nothing. And they were told, go to the city and work in a factory and everything will be great. And instead, they went to the cities and they worked in the factories, but it was horrible. Like, for a lot of people, working in the factories was even worse than being broke and homeless in the countryside. It was really bad. So these radicals, socialist radicals that had read the works of Karl Marx, they used to stand right outside the doors of the factory. And while employees were walking in and out, they would hand out pamphlets of Karl Marx work, trying to get people to think in a different way than this capitalistic greed. And they were saying, there's another way. We could do this differently. Then we had what's called Bloody Sunday. Got to give you a little backup. Bloody Sunday was January 22nd, 1905. Russia was in a war with Japan. Let me open up. Okay, so Russia. We all know how big Russia is. Russia is huge and populated. Was in a war with Japan, this teeny tiny cute little country. Who do you think won? You're wrong. Japan won a war against Russia. And just in case you're curious about what they were fighting about, they were both trying to take control of some land in here. But it's not so important what that war was about. But huge Russia lost a war with teeny tiny little Japan. And the people, like, imagine how embarrassing that would be to you as a person. What if I were an army general and you were my soldiers and we got in a fight with the 5-year-old class and the 5-year-old class won? How would that make you think about me? I'm your leader. I took you into that war and we lost. So the people were really, really disappointed in their leader, who now at this point is Nicholas II. Nicholas II is the leader of Russia when huge Russia lost a war against cute little island Japan. And the people are really disappointed. Well, this priest, a priest, arranged a peaceful march. And they were going to go to the Tsar Nicholas II's palace. And they were going to ask him, like, what can we do to make our country better? And it was peaceful. People were like praying and singing church songs, and they were carrying like religious icons with them. It was this really sweet kind of thing of, let's go ask the Tsar for help. But the Tsar was afraid. He ran away from his palace, and he had his soldiers stand in front. And so the Tsar's not there, he's run away, there are soldiers guarding the palace, and this big parade is coming down the street, and they're, you know, it's super peaceful. Think of like hippies singing peaceful songs, and they were singing church songs and praying. And when they got up to the palace, the soldiers opened fire on them. The soldiers killed hundreds of people, killed them. So then the people believed the Tsar has abandoned the people. The people were really, really upset. And then there was a revolution. Revolution of 1905. Man, when those soldiers opened fire on peaceful protesters, I mean, it was bad. The people were really upset. So there were strikes all over Russia. There were radicals were like storming into government meetings and taking over and saying, we run the government now. It was like just mayhem. And Nicholas II didn't know what to do. And so he made this announcement, okay, people, I'm going to change a bunch of stuff. And he made the October Manifesto. And the October Manifesto gave all people of Russia freedom of person, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of union. Freedom of person means no more slavery, no more serfdom. Freedom of conscience, that S isn't supposed to be there. Freedom of conscience means you're free to think whatever you want to think. Freedom of thought. Freedom of speech, you're allowed to say whatever you want to say. You know, this was a big thing back then, because people, if you spoke ill about the leader, they'd throw you in prison or kill you. No more of that. Freedom of speech. Freedom of assembly. That means you can have a protest and we're not going to kill you. And freedom of union, that's talking about labor unions in the factory that we already talked about before. This was a pretty big deal. And he also began this thing called a Duma. And a Duma is an elected group of people, like you all, the citizens, elect a group of people, and this group of people must approve before any new law is made. Must approve any new law. Everything's sounding really good, right? Yeah, but it can't go well because we're talking about world government here. World governments never go right. Everything sounds good until the first Duma actually met. They insulted the Tsar. They insulted Nicholas II and said all kinds of things about what a horrible leader he was and how he should get better. And so the Tsar immediately dissolved it. Dissolved means to like end. He immediately dissolved the first Duma. So it never actually happened. Then he made a new prime minister. New prime minister named Peter Stolypin. And Peter Stolypin, he was actually a kind of bright dude, and he realized that things really needed to change. He noticed that. And he went in and he made public schools better. He made roads better, but it wasn't really enough. It was just enough to where he thought the people would be happy. But the people weren't happy. He didn't change things enough to really help the people. And in 1911, they assassinated him. And now we're at 1914. Russia is still led by a czar, and the people are really unhappy. There's unrest. The people are not happy with the way their country is being run. And this is where we end.